and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And my hats are off to you for tuning in this week and every week, or whenever you can. And we really have been touched by the messages and support that we've gotten from you over the last couple of weeks.
It's true. A lot of really amazing messages that tell us how much you value the show, which is great to hear because we've been doing it so long. Sometimes we wonder. But you're a great, loyal audience out there, and thank you for tuning in, and feel free to be in touch with us anytime.
In the headlines,
in this holiday week,
Republicans continue the assaults on transgender dignity and are getting more and more Democrats to go along with them.
And we're sorry to report that Biden's Department of Education is abandoning protections for trans kids in school sports.
But Democrats in the Senate have confirmed a record number of federal judges, the most diverse group ever.
And once again, Trump has vowed there will be only 2 genders in the United States on day 1 of his administration.
And he appointed another out gay ambassador.
Ohio Republicans are working overtime to harm LGBTQ students.
And the New York City Council, New York City, is tearing down the wall of separation between church and state.
But California has gotten its first out trans school board member.
And in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, an 18-year-old trans woman was shot and killed.
We're going to tell you about several people we lost in the last week, a pioneering lesbian photographer and a San Francisco activist and philanthropist.
Act up in jeopardy.
He's being clever. Louisiana officials told their own health departments to stop promoting vaccines, but New Orleans is fighting back.
And I'm going to review Cult of Love on Broadway, a dramedy about a fractious family that includes a lesbian couple.
Do you want to give us a preview, thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm
feeling impatient.
I will go like this.
Teasing us again.
No, because that's the way I felt about it.
Okay.
It got a lot of nice notices.
Yes.
So Biden's Department of Education, the department has withdrawn its 2023 proposed rules that would have largely barred policies that forbade trans students from participating in single-sex sports.
Yes, state bans. So states try to pass laws that say trans kids cannot participate in sports that do not conform with their gender assigned at birth.
Now, that proposal did provide some carve-outs blocking trans students from some competitive sports. The department acknowledged a mix of public comments, but also pending lawsuits about the proposal, so they just withdrew it.
Well, it clearly has become a firestorm, and the president of the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, was testifying to Congress and got raked over the coals on this by a couple of senators who decided to take a little detour to this subject when that was not
Josh Hawley and John Kennedy.
Thank you. And he said, look, there are like 10 trans athletes in college sports.
Out of 510,000 athletes.
Yeah.
10. And this is what you're making a big deal about, and of course was the whole campaign for Trump.
And what was done very carefully over the last few years by various sporting governing bodies was to set up a system where people could be adjudicated on the basis of maybe their testosterone levels or their puberty experience or whatever. But all of that attempt at intelligent analysis has flown out the window.
And there's all kinds of data showing that, there's no particular advantage to being trans. It's, people want to assert that there is, but the data doesn't show that.
No, and they'll take 2 trans girls at a high school in Connecticut who are running track, and they have mediocre results in meet after meet after meet, and then they win one race, and boom, that's the end of the world. It's crazy, and what this produces is things like the young trans guy in Texas, the wrestler, who was forced to wrestle girls because Texas would not acknowledge him as a boy. And he was just horrified and humiliated by this, and he won all his matches, of course, against these girls. But the girls were not standing up for him to be defined as a boy in the midst of this.
Right. Most of the times the kids are okay with this stuff, especially at the school level, intramural level, all that kind of stuff.
Well, the ones who aren't, the ones who bring lawsuits, are provoked by the right-wing legal groups.
Yes.
And their hysterical parents.
All right. The National Defense Authorization Act passed overwhelmingly with the provision that minor children of military personnel cannot receive gender-affirming care. Our major organizations it had a lot of support from Democrats as well for this. I mean, they didn't get in the way of it, despite Tammy Baldwin's best efforts.
Yeah, the Republicans in the House had Democratic support.
Yes, and in the Senate.
Yep.
And she only got 10 votes in the Senate, I think.
Yeah.
So our major organizations have spent the aftermath after this horrible bill has gone through, demanding that President Biden veto the legislation. Now, it's too late.
He did not. He signed it.
Of course,
Yeah.
It's too late for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was too late. I mean, you got to do the work beforehand and get everybody on board and say we're never going to do this, and that didn't happen. So it just seemed like I was getting all these press releases. We demand. I mean, come on. Of course, you can. I mean, what's the point when you only got 10 votes in the Senate? Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So, meanwhile, better news from the Senate, where Chuck Schumer has succeeded in getting the Biden administration to confirm more federal judges than Trump did in his term.
235.
Yeah. So.
But that record was set by the Trump administration beforehand. Now, it is the most diverse group in history, sexually, racially, and by sexual orientation, and also in terms of legal experience. Biden only got one Supreme Court justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who replaced Democrat Justice Stephen Breyer. But the Supreme Court is basically lost for the rest of our lives, if not yours. Trump gets to appoint replacements for Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito so that he will have appointed 5 out of 9 Supreme Court justices, all Federalist Society members. And with the Republican 3-seat majority in the Senate, they ought to be easily confirmed.
Well, it's hard. I hesitate to say this. I shouldn't say this, but it's hard for me to imagine that Trump can come up with people who are worse than Alito and Thomas. I suppose it's imaginable, but
after the cabinet appointments that he's been making,
yeah, I guess so. All right, I won't pursue that.
What is it? What's her name? Eileen Cannon.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a?
And he has a majority in the Senate, so he could do that.
Right. All right.
Never mind.
And of course, Trump wants to put the Confederate names back on all the bases and take back the canal. But he also went on an anti-trans rant.
And Greenland, he still wants Greenland.
Still?
Yes.
He never gives up.
There are many fossil fuels there for him to mine, and it's a great strategic point militarily.
But this week he went on
He'll trade them Puerto Rico.
He went on another anti-trans rant at the Turning Point USA, reiterating his hateful promises. Let's go to the videotape.
With the stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school. And we will keep men out of women's sports. And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one? Under the Trump administration, it will be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. Doesn't sound too complicated, does it?
Well, that just gets more and more direct. It's really disgusting.
So my question is, of course it is, it's so hateful. And of course, you know, right after the election, he was sort of saying, well, this is a very small number of people and it's divided the country and we shouldn't. And then he gets up and just does this.
Well, listen to the audience reaction. They were orgasmic over the idea.
Because they're fed this stuff 24 hours a day on all their networks.
Yes.
Now, my question is, if there are only going to be two genders, does that mean there are no transgender people so that there are none to expel from the military? How is that going to work?
Well, that's a question better put to the incoming president.
There are an estimated 10,000 trans people in the military now. And
At least.
How are the armed forces going to get along without them?
Well, they're just going to reclassify them, maybe, and not kick them out.
And by the way, I did listen to Sarah McBride's thoughtful interview conducted by David Remnick of the New Yorker magazine, and I will link to it in our email. He pressed her on her abandoning trans people using restrooms in federal buildings, and she said she understood their anger, but she can't seem to bring herself to say that the House. All I sort of would be appreciated if she would say is that policy is wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm going to fight it.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not going to commit civil disobedience, as some would. But,
as some did.
Yes. But I
agree. She should not roll over that easily to say, I'm going along with whatever the rules are.
But, she did make some sense when she spoke of how the trans movement has gotten out ahead of the public on some of these issues, and we have to work harder to bring people along, much the way Obama spoke about racial issues. She said she's gotten a lot of support from Democratic colleagues and has even been welcomed by some Republican House members, but that's not stopping all those anti-trans policies.
Well, she has to be there for a while for people to calm down and get used to her and feel more shame about passing policies like this that are punishing her and those like her.
Well, I can imagine, people getting up on the floor talking about the gentleman from Delaware.
Yes, they certainly
And is anybody going to stop that?
Well, it'll be interesting to see if they do that. Nancy Mace, for instance, is
yes, continuing to lose it.
Yeah, but her friends say she has lost it, literally.
Well, yes, and so when she is challenged on something, the point is you must be trans. Former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, who does Fox News, accused her of being ungrateful to Trump, who made her by not supporting the funding bill put forth by President-elect Elon Musk. So she shot back by publishing an old photo of Gowdy asking, which bathroom do you think Gowdy uses? I mean, this is so juvenile and hateful. But a GOP consultant responded, I fired Nancy Mace a few months back because I'm a political consultant and not a babysitter, a sex therapist, or a doctor who can prescribe fixes for chemical imbalances. I don't have the time for her constant egotistical BS and drama in my life.
By firing, he means he was working for
Yeah.
her and he quit and said he didn't want to
She
work
is
for her
despised, much the way MAGA extremists are, but they get their way on too many issues. It's sort of like the way it was with Jesse Helms.
Yeah.
People didn't like him, but he won on his votes because he embarrassed people into voting for them.
It's a blackmail procedure, but I'm a little surprised that she didn't support the Trump version of the funding bill.
Well,
I guess she's joined the Freedom Caucus.
they all have their reasons.
Yeah.
Now, Trump did nominate out Democratic turncoat Bill White as U.S. ambassador to Belgium. Now, Bill White, famously dropped Hillary Clinton the night she lost the election and literally went over to Trump headquarters
Got
and
in his car, drove right over.
joined their party.
Well, he said, I'm not hanging out in this loser's pity party. We have a new president. I'm going to go support the new president.
And he's participated in several gay Trump unity events that were ill-attended. He once directed the Intrepid Air and Space Museum
Yes,
here
for
in
a
New
long
York,
time,
New York,
yes.
until he was caught lining his pockets. He paid $1 million fine to avoid prosecution. He claims to be for gay rights, but he says, I don't like identity politics. Well, I mean, even though he headlined the gay Republican events, gay Republican identities.
So we have Bill White, we have Rick Grinnell, and we have Scott Bessent, who seems to be the cream of the crop of this crop. So far.
We shall see. We shall see if any of them who have, some of them have expressed support for gay rights. I mean, Bessent certainly has,
Yep.
And White has in the past. Will they ever stand up and for LGBTQ rights?
I would settle for privately.
Yes. Right.
But meanwhile, we have Elon Musk, who's supporting the right-wing fanatics in Germany.
Yes. Well, what are you talking about?
Only the Alliance for Germany can save Germany.
Maybe if he found out that the party is now headed by a lesbian, he would have a different feeling.
There's so many questions we have for these people, and yet we don't get to ask them. How can we get them in here for an interview?
We'll try.
Yeah.
We'll have to ambush them.
Yeah.
In Ohio, the legislature says to censor LGBTQ content in curricula, but mandates ratting out LGBTQ students to their parents, especially if they're trans. School teachers and staff, including counselors and psychologists, must notify a parent if there is any change in the student's services, including counseling services or monitoring related to the student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being. It bans any sexual content K through 3, making it easier for little kids to be molested. I mean that because that's what the content is usually: bad touch, good touch, all that kind of stuff.
This is a parents' rights bill passed by the legislature. Has DeWine signed it?
He said that he would, but it has gone to him for signature. On top of that, it mandates that all schools find a time during the school day when students can leave for religious instruction.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
And again, that brings me to New York City, which is also tearing down the wall between church and state. You think we're a liberal city. The city council is fairly liberal on a lot of things. They voted double the money, $40 million, to fund security at private religious schools and making much smaller schools eligible. It passed committee. It's sure to pass the full council. Our council member, Eric Botcher, did vote against it. But, they say, the sponsors say, but there's this rise in anti-Semitism. This is their excuse. So, look, if a school is threatened and there is a credible threat, you send the police, you send whatever authorities you need to help resolve that situation. But this is just payola for these religious schools. And here's my question that's occurred to me. Where's the $40 million for protecting LGBTQ kids in schools who are under threat every day in many cases in terms of bullying? And I mean that. There's some minor programs. You're lucky if it's a couple of $100,000. Where is that $40 million? Where is that concern?
Where is the emphasis in the curriculum on an end to hate and a beginning to understanding and support of each other, all kids?
Absolutely.
That's how you interfere with the violence and the threats.
Right. Well, in better news, California has its first out trans school board member. She is Bobbie, B-O-B-B-I-E, Simpson in Shasta County, Gateway Unified School District.
It's actually a little surprising to me that this is the first out trans school board member in California.
Well, she beat an incumbent who with his wife were subjects of recall efforts. She is emphasizing service to gay and trans communities, excuse me.
And to other marginalized communities. She's very big on special ed and being sensitive to everybody's learning styles and supporting that.
Right.
So good for her. And she says that parents of gay and trans kids are thanking her directly for being out and for being visible and sensitive.
Representation. You want to talk about Rick Welts?
Rick Welts. I've always liked Rick Welts. He was like the first basketball executive to come out.
Back in 2011.
Yeah, and he's always seemed to be a good guy.
Good guy. He's in the NBA Hall of Fame already.
Yes,
he's 71 now.
Well, he worked for the Phoenix team and the Golden State Warriors as an out executive. And then he sort of decided to step aside and, if not formally retire, or at least not take these jobs. And now he's coming out of that he's been hired by the Dallas Mavericks to be their CEO.
And he's not just out, but he's been involved in helping LGBTQ athletes ever since he came out.
Right.
Co-chairing an event for Athlete Ally, honoring those trans track stars in Connecticut.
Yes, he supports trans athletes.
And he was very close friends with Billy Beane, the late out Major League Baseball executive and former player.
Well, I would like to think that Rick Welts is a good guy because that's how he has appeared over the years. He's another one we'd love to
This is Mark Cuban's team, isn't it?
Yes, but Mark Cuban has sold the team to a new group, and it's the new group that has hired Rick Welts. Not that Mark Cuban wouldn't. Mark Cuban's very pro-LGBT, but it's the new group that has hired Rick Welts.
Then in horrible news in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 18-year-old black trans woman Cameron Jamal McQueeze Thompson was shot to death by an underage suspect who has been charged with murder as an adult. Now, the family suspects it was a hate crime. The police suspect it had something to do with comments that she made about her killer online about his sexual orientation. So this, of course, that's obviously absolutely no excuse for violence, but this shows you how unhinged people get about these things. Thompson recently graduated from the Job Corps and worked at UPS. Funeral is planned for January 3rd.
Well, here's another no excuse for violence. In Los Angeles, an ex-cop has reached a plea deal on an assault he made on a trans man. The trans man was driving along and saw this cop abusing someone on the side of the road, and the trans man flipped him off, made a gesture. So the cop peels out of the situation he's in, leaves that behind, gets in his car and follows this guy all the way to a 7-Eleven, where he proceeds to beat him up while he's sitting on his chest, slamming him with punches to the face and saying, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." Which is just a way to establish a supposed alibi for all of this. He completely lied about this whole situation, and the guy he beat up lost his job for no reason at all. But the ex-cop Benza, now Joseph Benza III, now faces 10 years in jail. The judge went after him and said, this is outrageous. So at least they're getting him finally. But the poor guy who he beat up suffered a lot of injuries as well as the loss of his job.
In Red Bank, Tennessee, A pizzeria announced, we're not going to cater same-sex weddings as it would violate our religious beliefs. They said they hold this discriminatory belief without judgment towards others and don't intend to harm anyone. But that's, of course, what bigotry does. A local bookstore will no longer let Pizzeria Cortil operate a food truck on their property.
In Michigan, a 22-year-old man named Mac Davis has pleaded guilty to planning an armed attack on a political headquarters and a gay bar because they are faggot operations, according to him. The political party headquarters and the bar. He was heavily armed. For practice, he had a gay neighbor who he was constantly harassing, and he wanted to practice for this armed assault, so he shot up the neighbor's car.
What city was this in?
I can't remember the city. It was Michigan.
All right. Are you done with that?
Almost. I have a note here. I can't. Oh, he faces life in prison.
Wow. Well, in Santa Cruz, California, police arrested a 45-year-old man who had defaced a local gay bar. The Neighbors was the name of the bar. Just days after it opened. This guy's name was James Eason. Yep. He faces charges of vandalism, arson, and a hate crime. He carved an anti-gay slur on the front door, burned a button panel that opens the disabled entrance, and tried to insert burning napkins into cracks in the front door. He was identified with surveillance video, and they found that he was already in jail for something else.
These people are so creative. And then there is Tampa, Florida, following up on a case we've been following for some time, the dog park killing. A gay man used to regularly go hang out at a dog park with his dog, with his
we
friends.
Should say his name, John Walter Way.
Lay, yes.
Excuse me, Lay.
And there was a guy who also came to the park, Gerald Radford, who constantly harassed Lay.
Using slurs.
Homophobic slays, threats, on and on and on. And one day told him that he was going to die. And the next day, Lay goes to the dog park, and sure enough, Radford kills him.
So Radford tries to say, we got into I was just defending myself. He tried a stand your ground, very famous defense in Florida, Trayvon Martin case, also used it appropriately. But this judge just said, no, there are too many people witnessed your harassment. No one witnessed the murder, all right? But they witnessed...
Radford was claiming that Lay came at him and had to shoot him, and everybody
said... And who are you going to believe? Who are you going to believe? Him, he's dead, he can't talk, or me?
Well, the stand your ground defense has been ruled ineligible, but this case goes to trial in January.
In Columbus, Ohio, a 28-year-old who sextorted gay and bi men. He solicited on Grindr and other social media in Ohio, Colorado, and Washington. This guy was busy. Washington State was sentenced to 52 months in federal prison. Omar Uada, that's his name, solicited nude pics and videos, and then he demanded hundreds of dollars not to post them online. And when one 17-year-old wouldn't pay, he sent him to the kid's mother and other family members and classmates. And on Facebook, 8 young men were victimized that we know about.
What will President Trump do about this crime wave?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And sort of a heartening story. The New York Times reports that hundreds of wedding planners are offering their services free or at a deep discount to same-sex couples pushing to get married before Trump takes office. Now, while the mercurial Trump is capable of all manner of cruelty, the most immediate threat is the U.S. Supreme Court overturning the Obergefell decision, allowing states, so that then states would be allowed not to recognize same-sex marriages or otherwise weaken protections. There are cases working their way through the courts to weaken them, such as letting public officials not perform them if they have religious objections and that kind of stuff.
Well, we're headed for a theocracy.
Headed?
Well, the latest check-in on the slide, Nissan automobiles have dropped their DEI hiring and promotion.
Do you think there's no end to this? As I say, it's still a tiny fraction that have dumped this.
I think the trend is bad.
It is a bad trend, but
and
it's,
Robbie Starbuck, he met with Nissan, and he alone is creating this trend.
Well, again, the Human Rights Campaign has held on to most of the 1,300 people who cooperate with their corporate equality index.
So far, but look what we said earlier about them being ineffective on the defense bill.
Yes.
I am not optimistic that we're going to see the end of this anytime soon.
We have to find a way to reframe all these things.
We certainly do.
And of course, the LGBTQ employees at these companies need to demand better protections.
Yes.
All right.
So I think it's time to talk about some of the people we lost in the last week.
Yes.
Starting with Kathy Cade in Berkeley, California. A legendary, phenomenal photographer, died at the age of 82.
Not just a lesbian, but someone who chronicled lesbian relationships and the lesbian movement. She had already spent 10 years in the civil rights movement before turning to photography in 1971.
Yeah, as an activist.
Her work was featured in Off Our Backs and galleries, on books and feminism and gay life. She did a book of photos called A Lesbian Photo Album, The Lives of 7 Lesbian Feminists. No one would publish it, so she published it herself, and it became a groundbreaking book that a lot of people were influenced by.
Joan Byron, known as Jeb, also a legendary lesbian photographer who has documented the community and the movement for many years, said that Kathy Cade broke through the walls of exclusion and erasure and portrayed us as proud and powerful.
Yep.
She was a member of SNCC. She was at the 1963 March on Washington.
The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Very fought racist with a very overt pro-integration message.
Now, we have some other pictures that we're going to run of hers. One is Emerson Street Household. It had American Gothic overtones showing Cade herself, her partner, Kate Dolan.
That's her in the back standing in overalls.
And Dolan's young son and a friend from the women's movement. Cade said, "We wanted to present ourselves as women who would be taken seriously." And then she photographed the 1970, this one is called Gay is Good, San Francisco, 1971, showing women in that early Pride March. And then finally, Lori Hauser and Gus, G-U-S-S-E, 2, of lesbian moms with their very baby or very young children. She also photographed environmental protests, anti-nuke demos, labor strikes, and Occupy Wall Street, which is not that long ago.
Right.
She spent her later years at Strawberry Creek Lodge in Berkeley, a senior housing development with dozens of LGBTQ residents, developed more friendships with gay and straight men. She said her identity shifted from lesbian feminist photographer to old and artist. And so, anyway.
Died of complications from dementia.
Oh.
And then there's Bob Dockendorf, who died at 85 in San Francisco. And this is the California version of this segment this week. A big Gay USA fan, by the way.
Apparently, we heard from his friend and caregiver, Joey Jones. But he was. We have a picture of him without former supervisor, San Francisco supervisor Tom Amiano, who honored Dockendorf in Sacramento when he was in the assembly in 2009, called him a behind-the-scenes activist who didn't care for the spotlight. He helped finance the documentary on Sally Gearhart and so many other organizations.
Well, he's someone who was a major donor, certainly, and did finance a lot of things and raised a lot of money for local politicians. But he went beyond that. He was the president of the Harvey Milk Democratic Club.
And knew Harvey Milk in his early days.
Worked to get to know Harvey, timed his daily schedule to run into Harvey so that he could befriend Harvey and talk to him.
Now, and he served on the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Professionally, this Navy vet worked at the Pacific Maritime Association for 33 years. He had been forced to retire from the military for being gay, but managed an honorable discharge. In 1981, after being a captain in the Naval Reserves for 22 years, he got involved in the Service Members Legal Defense Network. Here he is with President Obama, because he worked with all of them on the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He started the Black Caucus at Harvey Milk Club. And Cleve Jones called Robert kind, smart, and principled. And I mentioned Joey Jones. He told us that Bob started a scholarship fund at the University of Iowa, his home, Bob's home state, for high school students who were gay and people of color. Mr. Jones told us that Bob introduced him to us 6 years ago, and it was their weekly ritual to watch.
He was originally from Burlington, Iowa, grew up on the family farm there, ended up in San Francisco, and ended up not entirely voluntarily going to Vietnam in the war, and spent about 3 years there. Was so horrified by what he saw that it turned him into a real activist.
So became a progressive.
Yeah. And a lot of us became progressives watching that war, but he was actually there.
And then there's the Reverend James Callan, C-A-L-L-A-N, who has died at 77, a Catholic...
In Rochester, New York.
Catholic priest, excommunicated in 1999 through the machinations of Ratzinger at the time, before he was Pope. After allowing women to celebrate Mass, blessing same-sex unions, and giving communion to non-believers. In other words, for being a real Christian.
Yes.
He established an independent Catholic church in Rochester, Spiritus Christi, transforming a poor parish into a flourishing interracial one, growing to a membership of 3,000. He was one of the first pastors to welcome people with HIV/AIDS.
And at the church, he established a free medical clinic, a homeless shelter, a residence for ex-prisoners, and a health clinic in Haiti. This is when he was in the regular church. He refused to live in the rectory.
Yes.
Because it was too plush.
He said, "This is not the way my people live," and they disciplined him for that.
Yes. Well, Ratzinger, you know.
No, I mean, this was just locally. The local bishop saying, "What are you talking about? You're going to spoil it for the rest of us."
No more fancy cars.
Well, you know, most diocesan priests do not take vows of poverty. They can live very rich lives if they want to.
I think it was his father who, when he was young, they'd walk past the church, and his father would say, "Look at all those fancy cars.
Yes.
They're, you know, these guys are really inappropriate in what they're doing."
Like most of the people who are going to be running the government next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. International news.
Tell us about this point of view thing from South Africa.
Oh, POV on PBS on December 30th is going to run a film called Who I Am Not. In New York, it's on at 10 p.m., 10 to 11:30. And it's about intersex people in South Africa, specifically two people, one who was a former beauty queen and one who is a real intersex activist. And we have a picture of them here. It sounds like a fascinating program. So that's Who I Am Not on POV on PBS on December 30th.
Are you sitting down? The Constitutional Court in Lithuania ruled that the country's Russian-style law against gay propaganda, ostensibly to protect minors, is unconstitutional. Now, the court said it artificially narrows the constitutional concept of family, restricts minors' freedom of information, and fails to ensure the distribution of objective information to minors about real social relationships. Reality, what a concept.
Thereby stunting their development as, good human beings.
Now, it's taken them long enough because the law in its first form was promulgated in 2002, and it just kept getting progressively worse.
Oh, take the long view. But the court said that the law disrespects human rights and dignity, and it's just a magnificent decision. It's always heartwarming in the midst of this morass of hate and violence and stupidity to find
Yes.
something so brilliant and forward-looking and loving and compassionate and all of that.
Last week we had good decisions out of Montana on gay and trans rights.
Yep.
Actually, this week the Montana Supreme Court upheld those kids who sued and said your destruction of the environment threatens our lives, and that case is valid.
On the other hand, at the Vatican,
Oh.
they have removed the LGBT pilgrimage from the calendar.
My God.
Never mind. We're not letting them march.
Well,
We don't care.
Okay. I don't usually talk about,
There was backlash.
I don't usually talk about data but this is official from Australia, from the Bureau of Statistics, not just a survey. They found that 4.5% of Australians 16 and over identify as LGBTQ, and just under 1% are trans and gender diverse, including non-binary people. For young people, 16 to 24, 9.5% are LGBTQI. And for those 75 and over, well, it's just 1.4%. All right.
I'm not Australian. All right. So you wanted to talk about France and the
I want to
Giselle
join the tributes
Pellicot.
to the bravery of Giselle Pellicot, who became the face of rape survivors in France and worldwide.
Yeah.
You know the story, drugged and raped by her husband, raped by 50 men. They were all convicted. The husband got 20 years, which was the max. 46 others convicted of all kinds of, 50 actually convicted, and they were all given sentences. She resolved to make shame swap sides by coming forward at the age of 72. But there's a gay angle to this. The website that he used to get people is called COCO, C-O-C-O. That's where it's an unmoderated website thing or list. And they've been gone after by lots of groups, and it took the LGBTQI group saying this is being used to alert people to beat us up in certain places and things like that. And they got it shut down. 480 victims of crimes from this website.
Wow. Okay, should we move on?
Well, in the UK, Chick-fil-A is moving to expand with a $100 million investment. They'd been slowed down for a while before the pandemic, but now all bets are off. And Stonewall says, we're trying to educate them. Stonewall is the human rights campaign of England or Britain.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. AIDS and health news.
Well, check out wait a minute. Check out the clue on Jeopardy this past week. I'll read it. A is for AIDS in this acronym, an organization founded in 1987 to advocate for better AIDS treatment. You have 30 seconds.
What could that be?
It's not the first time that what is ACT UP would be the correct question. They used a similar clue in 2013. There are a
lot of gay people
allies
working on
Jeopardy.
game shows.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. On the other hand, Louisiana is the real story of the week.
Yes.
It turns out that the Department of Health in Louisiana held a secret meeting. And what came out of that, at the behest of the extremely right-wing Governor Landry, a Republican who is an associate of Bobby Kennedy Jr., is that the Department of Health issued orders to their affiliates around the state that they could not promote COVID, flu, or Mpox vaccines.
No press releases, no vaccine events, or creating social media about it.
We are going to shift from paternalistic guidance to personal choice.
And by the way, Louisiana has the highest flu rate in the country, and it had 652 COVID deaths last year. Now the policy, so anyway, the American Public Health Association just called this, of course, malpractice. But after the story broke, the New Orleans Health Department issued a statement of resistance saying they remain committed to promoting vaccines, usually free of charge, encouraging everyone to get up to date on their vaccines, as do we. Get up to date on your vaccines.
And the staff of the Department of Health said that this new policy was destroying public health. Governor Landry has also hired a vaccine alarmist as Surgeon General of the state of Louisiana.
Just like DeSantis in Florida.
Oh,
Foxes in the chicken coop.
Did you see that Laura Trump withdrew her name?
Yes, why did she do that?
Because DeSantis was not going to appoint her.
Oh, so she withdrew.
Yes.
You can't fire me. I quit.
Right. I'm getting ahead of this story. Will he appoint himself? Why would he give up a governorship to be one of 100 senators?
Some people can't do it. He might be bored. Who knows?
Who knows?
There is now a global database of HIV-specific travel and residence restrictions hosted by the HIV Justice Network. It's called Positive Destinations, and a video documentary about it is online, and we'll link to it, or you can just go to positive.destinations.info. And this is very important information. If you're going to travel,
yes.
If you want to immigrate or anything, you need to know these things.
Yes, gives you country by country information, and you can plan your travels. All right.
Now you want to know what I think of Cult of Love?
In a second. I just want to double check with our director as I'm looking at our countdown clock that he started the clock at like 56:15.
CC.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cult of Love.
Yeah.
This is Leslie Headland's first Broadway play. She's written many off-Broadway. It's about Christians in Connecticut from hell among a family of devout Christians. The fallen away, the over-the-top, and includes a lesbian couple. Out, Zachary Quinto plays a favored but tortured adult son. It's the kind of show that will remind some why we don't go home for the holidays. I mean, I love my family, but, sometimes these things can be rather fractious.
But if you watch Hallmark movies, they're full of gay couples who are going home for Christmas.
But they don't all yell at each other all night.
Exactly.
It's gotten a lot of nice notices, but it really made me squirm. It sort of proves to me you can't go home again, and I can't imagine putting up with this kind of familial abuse, but much of it played for laughs. The performances are good, especially David Rasche of Succession. Remember him?
Yeah.
Playing the sweet, somewhat demented father, and Christopher Sears as a recovering addict prodigal son. But I was glad when I was no longer in their company.
Well, I have Connecticut family. We all get together after Christmas for Cousins Christmas, and everybody likes each other.
Good. That's good to see. It can happen. And look, when I would go up for family holidays, we just made a rule: no politics discussed, and that everybody got along.
Yes, and that's sort of an unspoken
rule.
The
gloves are off in the cult of love.
Okay. And interesting news, the Library of Congress has a national film registry, and every year they add some new films to the list of what they consider historically important films, the best films produced in the country.
And many of them are popular films.
Yes. It's not an esoteric intellectual exercise, but a couple of films of note have just been added by the Library of Congress to the National Film Registry. Gus Van Sant's My Private Idaho.
My Own Private Idaho.
Thank you. Which was an early, in this era, gay film.
Well, starring Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix as sometimes lovers in the film, which was like, wow, these were hot young stars, and they were mixing it up. Gus, of course, is openly gay.
In fact, very controversial at the time for this theme. So that's now on the Library of Congress National Film Registry.
Yes, and 1989's Common Threads, Stories from the Quilt by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, who made the film, the award-winning, Oscar-winning documentary about Harvey Milk.
Yeah. The Times of Harvey Milk.
Yes, The Times of Harvey Milk, which was so terrific. And, the Common Threads is, about the whole quilt project, but also interviews lots of people who, are living with AIDS at the time.
I think this film just gets more important every year as this knowledge is lost, as people forget or never knew. It's very sad to me how little people know about these topics. And
well, we're coming up on 30 years since the drugs that kept HIV under control, at least in the West, were made available, and so people have a totally different attitude in life. It's 30 years.
Absolutely, which is why it's so important that this documentation of it exists. If you are not well versed in the AIDS epidemic, are too young to have experienced the horror then, or just don't know, Common Threads is an excellent way to find out about it. And also the ACT UP Oral History Project, which interviews a couple hundred members of ACT UP, is you can get really caught up in that as each of these interviews goes on for a couple of hours, but it's fascinating material.
And I should just say, because people are asking, how are we going to get through the next 4 years? And the only way we're going to get through it, if we do get through it, is by taking care of each other, which was very evident in those horror days of AIDS. Because, you figured the government's going to take care of this epidemic. It's a health crisis. They're going to. They didn't. And 35 million people died around the world, and 35 million more got infected because of neglect. But we had to take care of each other, and that's what we're going to have to do now.
And neglect looks pretty good right now, given the assault that is headed our way at the tip of a spear. So we, even with a sort of benign neglect, as Patrick Moynihan would say, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, we had to fight back, and we had to fight back loudly and strongly to get them to pay attention to create those drugs. And that's all going to look like pablum compared to what we're headed into.
Well, the idea that we have to fight about the polio vaccine or any of this stuff is just insanity. And that's what we're up against. There seem to be no deal breakers for the Republican Senate in terms of, confirming these horror shows who are dedicated to undoing about 1,000 years of progress.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's Kash Patel having an enemies list at the FBI and sicking the entire FBI on people that they don't like, or throwing immigrants out of the country, legal or not, it's just going to be a horror show.
Well, of course, that's why Trump wanted to lift the debt limit, because he wanted all the money to fund his, deportation program. Although, folks, and it hasn't been reported enough, the main reason Elon Musk came out against that deal was because it went after China, and it was going to hurt his business.
But Trump is not going to give up on this business of getting rid of the debt limit, because when he was in office before, he increased the debt by trillions of dollars.
With tax cuts.
Tax cuts.
For the rich.
And he's going to do that again. And yes, he wants more money to throw at
himself.
Yes.
Because that's the main thing.
Yes. And his heinous programs.
I mean, folks, we were looking at, Ann asked me before the show, when did the income tax come in America? It turns out it was 1913 at a very low rate, but within a few years, they were taxing incomes of $1 million at 77%, because it's an obscene amount of money. And if you're allowed to keep all that money, you buy the government. And you can't have a democratic civil society if that's the way it operates.
Well, Elon Musk is just the most egregious example. He is the richest man in the world, and he is running roughshod over the Democratic Party and even the elected president.
Now, they say that they're going to he's going to go after all the Republicans who defied them on this first vote. But there were like 34 of them, and then there were, and then many more.
The Freedom Caucus.
And then many more went along with it on the second bill. So they can't get rid of all of them, or can they?
I think their ambition knows no bounds.
But I mean, what are they going to have loyalty? You're going to have to sign a loyalty oath. I will always vote for Trump no matter what he comes up with. Now,
More
some
or
people
less,
are there
yes.
already.
Yeah.
Some people are there already,
Yeah.
but not everybody.
Well, I'd like to think it's quite a choice. The people who have defied him are the people who are the really ultra right-wing members of Congress.
Yeah.
Are we in favor of them?
No.
No, but anything that undermines Trump and slows him down feels like a good thing. But we have to be careful who we get in bed with.
And of course, is Elon Musk even a citizen of the United States?
I don't know, but
because they are talking about him as speaker,
well,
and the speaker doesn't have to be a member of Congress.
No, and Trump took great delight in saying at that Turning Point conference, oh, people say he's going to be the president, but ha ha ha, he can't be the president. He was born in South Africa. Well, no one's talking about him literally being the president. They're just talking about him running over you and taking power and control, which you have let him do quite a bit already.
Well, I do want to let you all know, first of all, Mele Kalikimaka, Happy Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, everything else. Happy New Year.
Kwanzaa, New Year.
Yes, everything. But next week on Gay USA, we got a special. We're going to do about a half hour with two very special guests.
Half an hour each.
Yes. One is Tom Viola, who's going to talk about his 36 years leading Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS.
He's retiring at the end of the year, although he will continue working with the group as a consultant for a while as he hands over the reins to Danny Whitman, his deputy or director of development.
Basically, yeah.
So there's going to be, he talks about the transition. We recorded the interview the other day, and it's just wonderful to hear his
He's
stories.
a wonderful guy, and
He really
a lot of
is.
the name may mean nothing to you because he's always been behind the scenes, basically. At most of the events, he doesn't get up there and give a speech and everything. He lets other people do that, and he just makes things happen for so many people, for hundreds of organizations around the country, and not just AIDS organizations. Women's health, all those kinds of things.
And quite visionary in funding activism, too, not just service delivery. A lot of that, but also activism. And it's great to hear him talk about his association with Colleen Dewhurst, who was his mentor in this work.
She was a great actress, and she was when she became president of Actors Equity, she said, I can't even find a pencil. You want me to do this job? That's what she said. I'm going to need help. And they gave her Tom Viola to be her assistant. Yeah. And then because AIDS was accelerating, they founded Equity Fights AIDS and put Tom in charge of it.
It's great stories, great guy. You'll want to hear this interview. And then, icing on the cake, the second half hour with our associate producer, Bill Ballman, who you've seen here occasionally, who's worked with us for 20 years and is a legendary activist on his own.
Yep.
And he talks about his
since the early days of the movement, 1970.
Right.
And from the dawn of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And both of these men, and they're very open about it, happen to be people living with HIV/AIDS.
Right. But Bill had this whole career as a DJ. He's still doing it occasionally. Very well known for his work in music, and talks a lot about that and about the early days of the movement, the Lavender Hill Mob, Gay Activists
Which preceded
Alliance.
ACT UP.
Yes, and modeled a lot of things for ACT UP. So next week, a great show with the interview with these two, and then we'll be back with the news a week later.
Around January the 8th.
But it's been a fascinating year, and I'm sure next year will be just as interesting. We'll see you then.
Bye.